started like a normal weekend getaway. Nothing fancy. Just 3 friends, Rico, Siska, and Danny, deciding to take a break from the chaos of city life. They had all been burned out from school and work, and the noise of Jakarta had started to feel like a cage. Danny had the idea. He said his uncle had a small house near Lake Toba, in a quiet village most tourists never visited. It was peaceful, cheap, and surrounded by nature. It sounded perfect. Rico had never been to Lake Toba before. He'd heard the stories. Of course, the legends, the myths, the ghosts. But he never really believed in that stuff. He just wanted a quiet weekend. Siska agreed right away. She loved the idea of taking photos by the lake and maybe seeing stars at night for once. So they packed up, left early Friday morning, and after a long drive and a few wrong turns, they finally arrived in the afternoon. The first thing Rico noticed was the silence. The lake was stunning, huge and endless, with dark blue water stretching far beyond what the eye could see. Mist hovered gently over the surface like it never really left. The air was cooler, softer, but somehow heavier, as if the place had a weight of its own. The village itself was small, really small. Just a few wooden houses scattered around, most of them old. Some looked abandoned. A couple of grandmas sat outside peeling vegetables, but no one said much. They just stared as the car rolled in. What struck Rico as odd was the lack of children. Not a single laugh. No running footsteps. No voices calling for their mums. Just the sound of the wind in the trees and the quiet lapping of water against the shore. It didn't feel like a place people lived. It felt like a place people left. They were staying in Danny's uncle's old wooden house. It had 2 bedrooms, a squeaky floor, and windows that didn't quite close all the way. But it was cozy enough. There was no Wi-Fi, barely any signal, and just a single old TV that didn't work anymore. For once, that didn't bother them. They were ready for offline peace. That night after dinner, they brought out some corn and started roasting it near the lake. They sat on wooden crates, wrapped in jackets, sipping hot tea, the stars faint above them and the lake still as glass. At one point, Siska stopped chewing and looked out over the water. "Why does this place feel sad?" she asked quietly. Danny chuckled. "You're just not used to village silence," he said. "Your brain's probably waiting for traffic sounds or TikTok notifications." But Rico wasn't laughing. He couldn't explain it, but Siska was right. There was something off, like the silence was too deep. Like the air wasn't just quiet, it was hiding something. Rico glanced across the lake. There was no movement, no boats, no night fishermen. Just the mist floating slowly, almost unnaturally, like it was alive. They stayed outside for a little while longer, talking about nothing. Random stories, old jokes. But there was a strange tension beneath it all, like none of them really felt comfortable. Eventually they called it a night and went inside. Siska took the smaller room. Danny and Rico shared the one with 2 mattresses on the floor. It should have been easy to sleep. But Rico lay awake staring at the ceiling. He wasn't sure what kept him up. It wasn't the mosquitoes. They'd already lit coils for that. It wasn't the bed. It was old but soft enough. It was something else. Something he couldn't name. And then, just after 2 a.m., he heard it. A scream. It wasn't sharp or loud. It was low, echoing. Almost like it came from deep underwater. It lasted maybe 3 seconds. Then silence again. Rico sat up fast. His heart jumped into his throat. He looked at Danny, still asleep, snoring quietly. He stood up, walked to the window, and slowly pulled the curtain. The lake looked the same. Misty, still, empty. But that sound, it didn't feel like a dream. It felt real. He stayed there for a while, staring, waiting for something else. Nothing came. After a long time, he finally lay back down. But he didn't sleep. He just waited for morning. When the sun finally rose and the light slipped through the wooden slats of the window, Rico dragged himself out of bed. Danny yawned, stretched, and joked about how he could sleep through a volcano. Siska was already up, drinking tea on the porch. She turned to Rico as he stepped outside. "Hey," she said. "Did anyone else hear that scream?" Rico stopped dead in his tracks. She wasn't joking. He opened his mouth to answer but didn't say anything. He just looked at her. Then he turned to Danny, and Danny had gone pale. No one spoke for a few seconds. They didn't laugh it off this time. They didn't say it was just a dream, because all three of them had heard it, and deep down, they all felt it. The scream wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. That morning, Rico couldn't stop thinking about it. The scream from the lake echoed in his mind, looping again and again like a broken record. It had sounded too real, too close. It didn't feel like a dream or a trick of the night. It felt human, and that's what scared him the most. As the sun rose and light spilled over the misty hills surrounding Lake Toba, the three friends tried to distract themselves with breakfast. But no one had much of an appetite. Danny, always the most talkative, suggested they take a walk around the village, maybe get to know the locals, ask a few questions, just to ease their nerves. So they did. They walked through the narrow dirt paths between wooden houses, past kids playing with makeshift kites and old men drinking bitter black coffee on rickety benches. They approached a group of elders sitting under a banyan tree and asked casually, "Is it normal to hear sounds from the lake at night?" One old man gave a nervous chuckle and said, "Ah, the lake, remember." The others fell silent. One of them tapped his pipe twice against a rock and stood up, slowly walking away. The smile on the old man's face faded quickly, replaced with a seriousness that made Rico feel uneasy. "What does that mean?" Danny asked. The old man didn't reply. He just stared at the lake in the distance, like he was remembering something he didn't want to remember. They moved on, unsure what to think. The mood was strange. People seemed friendly enough. But whenever they brought up the lake or anything about the scream, the conversation shifted, like they were stepping on something sacred or cursed. Then they saw her, an old woman sitting alone near the edge of the dock, slowly tossing breadcrumbs into the water. The fish gathered in swirls beneath the surface, snapping quietly at the floating crumbs. Her silver hair was tied back neatly, and her posture, though bent with age, carried a kind of grace. Danny greeted her politely. "Good morning, Ibu." She turned her head slowly, and Rico felt a sudden chill. Her eyes were cloudy, almost completely white, as if she were blind, but somehow they felt like they were staring directly into his soul. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly, almost as if to herself. Rico exchanged a glance with Danny. "What do you mean?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. She reached into a small pouch by her side and sprinkled a few more breadcrumbs into the water. Then, in a voice that was barely above a whisper, she said, "A long time ago, a girl drowned here on her wedding night. The villagers heard her scream once, then never again." Siska furrowed her brow. "That's just a legend, right?" The woman smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the kind of smile you see on someone who knows something terrible and has lived too long with it. "The scream you heard was not the first, and it won't be the last." A silence fell between them. The only sound was the lapping of the water against the wooden posts and the occasional flap of fish breaking the surface. Rico wanted to ask more, but the woman had already turned away, her face blank, her hand continuing its slow, mechanical rhythm of feeding the fish. They didn't press her further. As they walked back toward their cottage, the air felt heavier. The sun was high, but everything seemed dimmer somehow, like the light couldn't quite cut through the memories lingering in this place. Back inside the wooden house they'd rented, they tried to go about their day like normal. Danny played a movie on his laptop, but none of them really watched it. Siska pretended to read. Rico stared out the window, watching the lake. He couldn't shake the image of the old, woman's pale eyes, or the way her voice trembled. When she mentioned the girl, night came quickly. Too quickly. They made dinner and tried to laugh, tried to distract themselves with stories from college and bad karaoke nights in Jakarta. But there was always a pause after the laughter, a gap, a silence that returned again and again like a tide. They agreed to stay inside, lock the doors, don't go near the water. But around 2 a.m. Rico woke up. It was as if someone had whispered his name, but he couldn't be sure. He sat up slowly. The room was quiet. Danny and Siska were still asleep, or pretending to be. Then he heard it, a scream. This time it was longer. It echoed through the air, bouncing off the hills and washing over the village like a wave of ice. He felt his skin crawl. It wasn't just fear, it was grief. Like the scream carried the weight of loss, betrayal, something ancient and unfinished. He wasn't alone. Danny sat up wide-eyed. Siska clutched her blanket tightly. "It's closer," she whispered. Rico nodded, unable to speak. Then came the second sound, crying, soft, distant, but unmistakable, like a woman sobbing underwater. They stayed like that for what felt like hours, frozen, listening. The crying didn't stop. It faded, grew louder, then faded again, like it was moving, like it was searching. No one dared move until the first light of dawn peeked through the curtains. Only then did the sound vanish, like it had never been there at all. In the morning, they didn't speak much. They were all thinking the same thing, but no one wanted to say it out loud. The lake was hiding something. Something old, something angry, and now it knew they were here. Rico didn't want to stay another night. Everything in his gut told him to pack up and leave while he still could. The scream from the lake hadn't been a dream, and the crying that followed, it had sounded too real, too human. But Danny, ever the rational one, tried to explain it away. "It's probably just an animal, or some drunk playing a prank," he said, his tone too casual, too forced. "One more night, then we go home, I promise." Rico hesitated but eventually nodded. Maybe Danny was right. Maybe it was just their nerves. The atmosphere around Lake Toba could play tricks on the mind, especially at night. The fog, the silence, the way the water never really seemed to move. It all had a way of making you feel like you weren't alone, even when you were. That evening, Rico stood alone at the edge of the lake. The water didn't reflect the sky. It was strange, ominous. It looked like oil, dark, deep and utterly still. The sky above was a dull grey, and not a single star could be seen. He stared at the surface, trying not to blink, and then he saw something. Just for a second, a piece of white cloth fluttering beneath the surface, like it was caught on something. It moved slowly, like it was dancing underwater. Thin, delicate, almost like a veil. He squinted, took a step closer. Then it vanished. His heart skipped. He glanced around, looking for someone to tell, to confirm what he'd seen. "Siska?" he called. She'd been nearby just moments ago, scrolling through her phone near the dock. He turned again. "Danny?" But only the wind answered. "Siska!" he called again, louder this time. No answer. The dock was empty. He walked back toward the house, thinking maybe she had gone inside. But the door was open and no one was there. He checked the small kitchen, the rooms, even the back of the house. Nothing. "Danny, where's Siska?" he asked, a hint of panic creeping into his voice. "She was just with you," Danny replied, confused. "What do you mean she's gone?" I turned for 1 second. 1 second. They searched everything again. Every corner of the house, under the porch, around the dock. They shouted her name louder now, over and over. "Siska!" And then they heard it. A scream, louder than before, but this time, unmistakably her voice, high-pitched, panicked, desperate, coming from the lake. They froze. It didn't sound like it was coming from far away. No echo, no distortion. It was coming from the center of the lake. like she was standing on the water itself. Without thinking, they ran straight to the edge, to the place where the dock reached out toward the fog-covered water. But just as they arrived, the mist rolled in fast, thick, blinding. They couldn't see their hands. They couldn't see the water. They couldn't even see each other clearly. "Siska!" Danny shouted again, voice cracking. But the scream was gone. No splashing, no crying, no sound at all. Just silence. Too quiet. Not the kind of silence you hear when everything is calm, but the kind that makes your ears ring. Like the world had stopped breathing. They waited there for what felt like forever, calling her name, shouting into the mist. But nothing came back. No voice, no answer, no Siska. By sunrise, the fog had lifted, but she was still gone. They called the authorities. The local search team brought divers. Boats combed the lake all morning. Ropes, sonar, everything they could use. But they found nothing. Not her phone, not her shoes, not even a ripple on the surface. It was as if she had never been there, as if the lake had swallowed her whole. Rico couldn't speak for a long time. He sat on the front steps of the house, staring at the lake as the sunlight shimmered on its surface, as if mocking them, as if nothing had happened. Danny tried to stay strong. He kept calling people, answering questions, coordinating with the local team. But his hands trembled. They both knew something wasn't right. People don't just vanish. Not like that. That evening, when the search was called off for the day, Rico walked alone down to the dock again. The wind was colder now, the lake darker than before. He stood in the same spot where they had last heard her. The wooden planks beneath his feet creaked gently. His eyes scanned the water, and then he thought he heard something. Not a scream this time, not a cry, just a faint, soft whisper, calling his name. Rico! He froze. His skin turned cold, like ice under his shirt. His breath caught in his throat. The whisper wasn't behind him. It was beneath him, coming up from under the dock. He stepped back, heart pounding, nearly tripping as he stumbled away. The whisper faded. Silence returned. But he could still feel it. That presence, that pull, like something under the lake wanted to be heard. Or worse, wanted to be followed. That night, Rico didn't sleep. He packed his things, told Danny he was leaving. He didn't care if the trip was cut short. He didn't care if there were still questions. "I'm done," he said. "I'm not staying another night." No one blamed him. And when he got back to the city, to the noise and lights and people, he thought the fear would fade. It didn't. Even months later, he couldn't go near lakes or pools at night, couldn't hear the sound of water dripping without his chest tightening, couldn't even close his eyes in the shower without remembering that scream. Because sometimes, when he was alone, he still heard her. Not every night, but sometimes, from somewhere far off, just on the edge of hearing, a voice that wasn't wind, wasn't memory, calling his name. Rico! And every time he heard it, he never answered, because deep down he knew she was still there, somewhere beneath the surface, waiting. And the lake? It wasn't done. Not yet. It had taken something, and it would take more, because whatever lived beneath that dark, still water was still hungry.